Hi, and welcome to Career Mobility with James Mcilvena in June 2026. How are you, James?
I'm doing exceedingly well, thank you.
Fantastic. I know you've been doing a little bit of travel. What's that all been about?
Yeah, look, have we had a global leadership event in Munich the week before last? Uh, long way to go, but really
Yeah,
beneficial. Again, without sharing the detail of the content because it was quite confidential for our business, but
yeah.
AI appeared as one of the key topics that we were considering. And now I'm mostly recovered from the jet lag, and I got to tick off a bucket list item for me. So, for those that
What did
know
you do?
the Eisenbach, which is one of the rivers in Munich, which creates like a standing wave, and people go into the park and go and surf that standing wave.
Oh,
I've always wanted to see that in person, and I got the chance to do it.
oh, wow. How cool is that? Oh my gosh, that sounds really hard.
It was pretty cool, and it looked difficult compared to like surfing in the ocean, but it was actually even weirder was you knew when you were getting close because you see people like uh, tiptoeing through the city in wetsuits carrying surfboards. It looked so out of place. Thinking, well, where are they going? Going, I know where they're going, but it looked pretty weird.
Oh wow, that's pretty impressive. Well, it's like being in the Gold Coast in that case, I guess.
Very much like being in the Goldie, yeah.
Awesome. Brilliant. All right. Well, I'm glad to have you back safe and sound. Now, we are going to be talking, sort of really completing some of the things that we've been talking about in the last few months, actually. We've been talking about various things. The first one was really about understanding the market. We've been talking about from being stuck to strategic. We moved on to turning momentum into opportunities. And today, we're really going to talk about how you can make the move count. Because at the end of the day, as we always say, James, everybody lands. It's just about timing, and it's just it happens, but it's just we can't tell you when. So it's one of those things. So we're going to talk about a bit from that sort of offer to onboarding. So making the right move and thriving in your next chapter. So that's what we're going to focus on today. And essentially, the first question I have for you, James, is like, why can this stage do you think feel as uncertain as earlier parts of career transition? Because really, this is the end part, but sometimes it still feels uncertain. Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think whether you've just been through a internal process and take on a new job, whether you've been through career transition or whether you've gone out to the market because you're dissatisfied with your current job and landed a new role. Starting any new chapter is uncertain. I
Mm,
think the level of uncertainty is heightened for people who have gone through a career transition journey, and that can be for a range of reasons. But one of the main ones is they don't want to go through that process again. And they don't want to go through that process again anytime soon. So they are probably more sensitive to the structure and the longevity and the future strategy and whether that role is a safe role or likely to be impacted. But
yeah.
then also what they take from sort of learnings from the experience they've just had. So is this the right role? Have I applied all of the things I've learned when I've had the time to reflect and discuss with the coach and learn everything that individuals do learn if they've interacted fully with a transition process, right? Is this as the ultimate prize at the end of it? Use the well used term like was the juice worth the squeeze type of thing. And so there is almost with that with all of those learnings a probably an additional pressure on the new role to actually deliver something really great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as you said, with AI, it's such a talk at the moment. Lots of articles around talking about obviously, displacement, but also how are jobs changing? What does the jobs landscape look like in the future? Hard to tell which jobs are going, which jobs are staying, which jobs being created, all of that sort of stuff. So right now, I think one of the things we want to talk about is how do you evaluate what is the right opportunity and how do we help people with that? So some of your thoughts on this. So we want to help clients really to avoid sort of reactive decisions or choices around new roles. So what should people be thinking, do you think, about when they actually receive an offer beyond the salary and the title in this moment?
Yeah, there will always be, to answer that question, an individual element to it in regards to what's important to that person. So, my answer to what's right might be a little different to your answer as to what's right, depending on what I value most. What is important and what is, I suppose, universally true is actually having a very clear selection criteria about what matters to you, and then
Yeah.
assessing the opportunity presented to you against that. And it's almost like the old pros and cons list. And then, the pros and cons will be everything from how you've negotiated the remuneration package to what are the ancillary benefits due to sense of purpose, due to how much you like the potential leader you're going to be working with. That's just a few, but there'll be like a big pros and cons list. And so then the ability to say, I've actually done the important thing at the end of all of that is, have I done a proper assessment? I didn't just jump and take the first thing offered. And I know it's easy to do because if people have had a
Yeah.
difficult transition and it's felt like, gosh, I was in a lot of processes and there was a lot of ghosting and there was a lot of disappointment. It is very
Yeah.
easy when an offer comes along to go, I better take this one, even if their spidey senses are tingling that maybe not. And I do speak to a lot of people who have buyer's remorse because they've done that and jumped at an offer after a difficult transition period, and then that's not the role that sticks for them. So as long as you have a
Yeah.
pros and cons, and as long as you've made a thorough assessment, it doesn't matter if it is not your next role for life or your next role for 3 years. It really doesn't. But what does matter is you've actually done an assessment, you've made a good decision. And if you need to, check with your coach, check with family, friends, colleague, like get others' opinion on it, like talk it through.
Mm.
That list and the assessment doesn't need to be an internal thing only.
So on that, I guess, because the pros and cons, brilliant way, I think, of, for anything really, when you're trying to work out what's going to work. How do clients then, what would be your advice on how to assess this? Because as you say, speak to sort of people in your network, speak to family even. What else could they be doing about assessing that and working out what's the right move for them in this uncertain market?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's talking to family and friends, but I actually think sort of sense checking, and we have said it in almost every other stage of the process, right? Don't forget networking on this component too. So
Yeah, good point.
I'm careful how I word this because I don't want to say that people can often gild the lily when it comes to what they say you might be getting in a selection process, but it's not uncommon, right? Think about the
Yeah.
fact that most people, no matter whether it's an agency, whether it's an internal recruitment team, whether it's for an RPO business, if you are their preferred candidate, they have a vested interest in selling that role to you.
Mm.
So remember that if you are their target candidate, anything you can do, it's almost like reference checking them on the offer that's being made to you. And that's not the basics of the offer as to what's going to appear in the letter of offer. This is
Mm.
actually the less tangible things around connection to sense of purpose, what other people there enjoy about working there. Is the culture as amazing as they said it was supposed to be through the selection process? And so remember your networks. If you know someone there, if you know someone who has a friend who works there, like do the extra networking discussion to say, hey, I'm considering a offer with XYZ, or anonymize it.
Yeah.
As to, it might not be you assessing the offer, just trying to find out a little bit more about the company and actually see if you can use your networks to get like an insider's view, not the view from someone with a vested interest in you taking the role.
Yeah, brilliant advice. And unlike those, when is it a smart time to say yes, or when should someone just sort of pause or even walk away from the opportunity? Like, what point? What are those go no goes?
Again, it'll be individual, but once you've done that pros and cons list, I think the walk away is when you actually have an honest discussion with yourself and say the cons outweigh the pros, and I'm actually doing this because I'm just want to take a job versus I want
Mm.
to take a job that has some benefit to me. So if there was an absolute rule in, rule out for me, it would be you can have reservations. That's not a problem.
Mm.
Uh, but you would have to, in my view anyway, you would have to have a clear reason for why you're taking it. So let me give you an
Yeah.
example to try and bring it to life. I might say that, hey, you know what? I have some concerns about the longevity of this opportunity. I maybe have some concerns about whether their sense of purpose aligns exactly to mine over the long
Mm.
term. But you know what? On the pros column, I'm actually going to learn something which it actually enhances my value in the market significantly.
Yeah.
So I go into this with it's not a rule out because there's enough in the pros column from a learning and from a my market value standpoint to say that's great, even though there might be like a lot of things in the cons column. So it's an individual choice, but if you can't clearly answer what is the benefit in taking this role to me, that's probably your rule out.
Yeah. I think the other thing is as well, if one of the cons is sort of because it's not permanent in this market, it's that thing of, I guess, recognizing that actually sometimes we know things can go from temp to perm, or contract to permanent. That can happen, but also, as you've rightly said, you're going to gain potential experience. If that's in your pros column, that might be even more valuable.
Yeah, and I would argue, I mean, what is permanent these days?
Good point.
I mean, let's face it, like I would suggest I've seen just as many contract roles last longer than permanent roles. So
Mm,
I don't know. I
yeah.
think it's becoming increasingly fluid compared to what it was 15 years ago as to what a permanent role actually means.
Yeah, okay. So decision what we want to help then again is people make decisions with confidence. So, remove the pressure on getting it perfect because we know that doesn't really exist. So why do you think, James, people put so much pressure though on making their next move the perfect next move?
It plays a little bit to what I mentioned before around the fact that they've probably learnt a lot about themselves. They've learnt a lot
Yeah,
about what they want and don't want in the transition journey if they've taken full use of what's available to them.
yeah,
And so that in a way creates the option. I think the other element would be if they've not enjoyed the process of actually having gone through career transition, and even if the outcome is good at the end of it, and as we started this session with, like everyone lands, that's why this topic is relevant for them. Uh,
yeah,
but there would understandably be I actually don't want to be back in this process anytime soon. So there's that layer of pressure on the discussion as well. So taking that pressure off a bit, actually understanding that it doesn't have to be perfect, that there is probably no such thing anymore as a permanent role or a role for the remainder of your career, and scaling that pressure back a bit just to that fundamental question of like, is there enough benefit that I have ticked the box to I personally see value in this?
yeah. So the reframe, what would be like the healthier way of perhaps to think about career decisions at this stage?
If I was to really reframe it back to its most simple thing is this next move beneficial to my long-term career aspirations or not? Not
Yeah,
putting the pressure on a particular role or this
yeah,
particular role. It's,
yeah.
is this taking me in the right direction? So, yeah, every journey begins with sort of a single step. So think about whether this is a step in the right direction or the wrong direction, not whether it gets me to the end of the marathon.
It's very philosophical. I love that. So if we're going to let go of this sort of transition mindset, so help clients to sort of shift identity again into whatever's new for them. Um, what do you think? What mindset shifts that need to happen basically so that someone moves from job search mode into new role mode?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a very interesting move because I think it will, at an individual level, be a question that people need to ask themselves of how rigorous has my career transition journey been? Like, how structured was I during my
Yeah,
career transition journey? And actually, do I need to establish some new habits, some new rhythms about the way I go about things. So again, I'll try and give you an example. If you've got someone who during their career transition journey has kept the discipline of, and we've talked about this in prior discussions, DJ, if they're the people who sort of get up in the morning and they
Yeah.
put on their suit of armor and like they're ready to go, and they treat like their job search as they would treating working in a role, then the transition's probably pretty easy. If
Yeah.
that's not been your reality through transition, you actually really need to have a think about which habits you're going to either create or which habits you
Yeah.
might need to break that you've enjoyed through transition in order to be able to make that change to like a new role, particularly if it's a new permanent role, or a new full-time role versus a role that is like more of a portfolio career or entrepreneurial move.
Absolutely. I've seen also, I think the other thing is people, go hard as it was, in the actual job search itself and have the rigor and the habits around sort of doing the work, get to the role, accept the role, and then take the break, so that they actually can have that time to, pause, reflect, recalibrate and kind of refresh before actually moving into a new venture. So yeah, that can be smart move too. How do you think clients can reset and show up with confidence from day one? Maybe going on the holiday or taking a bit of a break can be one idea, but what other thoughts do you think on that, James?
I think number one is actually being very, very clear and doing the extra work to actually understand the expectations.
Yeah.
So for everyone, going in and being very clear on what success looks like, what's expected of you, what's available when it comes to onboarding. These are simple, fundamental things, but actually the fundamentals done well are actually really impressive early on in a role. So don't put any extra pressure on yourself. Just do the basics really, really well. Turn up with a plan. Make sure that you show from day one that the things that you're being taught are being absorbed and
Mm.
then demonstrated. So be very conscious about how you're doing those things, and that's a great first impression, no matter how you've come into a new role.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, we're going to talk about the first 90 days because I think it is such an important time period, really, isn't it, in that first role? So what do you think new starters should focus on then in those first 90 days to really set themselves up for success?
Yeah, and I held off on that last question because the 90-day plan is an absolute essential. So beyond what I've just said,
Yeah.
even if, I mean, it is quite often something that is referenced throughout a selection process, even if it was not referenced in a selection process. Failure to plan, prepare to fail. And so actually having a clear agenda, and you might get a start point, and this is why it's important to consider actually what your new opportunity has when it comes to structure for you, because there will be some organizations and they'll blow you away with the structure of what they expect from you when it comes to induction and onboarding.
Mhm.
And then there'll be others where you'll start and you'll be lucky if you get your laptop within the first 2 weeks. So the first 90-day plan is something where it might require almost all of the input from you, or it might require just some tweaks to like a very, very structured onboarding from your new employer. But regardless, you almost certainly need to have a sense of direction in that first 90 days. Otherwise, it is way too dangerous to just be able to float, get to the end of the 90 days, and to not have anything to show for it. And if you can actually go to an employer, and this is whether the 90 days is your probation period or you've got a longer probation period, but you want to be
Yeah.
able to take control of the narrative and go back to your employer and say, this is what I said I'd do, this is what I did, this is the impact.
Yeah.
There's no better way
Yeah.
to start a new role. And if you've set those benchmarks up front, if they've been unclear or they change their expectations of you, you have your true north to go back to. and prove that you've
Yeah.
done exactly what you said you do. And then you can have a different discussion with them about, okay, so how do we work together to get greater clarity and alignment on what you expect of me? But if you don't have that to go back to, it's a bit he said, she said, as to whether it was your fault that things weren't accomplished the way they wanted them or whether they were unclear.
Yeah. Yeah. Bit of co-creation sounds like that's a good thing to do. Yeah, be super, super clear. So you probably answered this question, but I guess that's really what high performers do. So the question, what do high performers do differently in those first, early weeks and months that perhaps others don't? And it would first be the planning, it'd be the co-creation, but also, just working things together. So yeah, I'd love to see if you've got any other ideas on what do high performers do that others don't.
Yeah, no, look, I think there is actually a big difference between what a high performer would do. So if I consider the 90-day plan
Mm,
and sorry, one thing I should have mentioned but didn't. It's important that plan is actually it's not just your own personal plan, that is shared and it's endorsed
yeah,
by your employer and they have a chance to provide input to it. But that's table stakes. So if we consider that as table stakes I did what was required of me, great. The high performers will go beyond that. So the high performers will say, not only do I have my 90-day plan, I did exactly what I said I was going to do, and this was what was achieved from it. The high performers will say, and this is what I've learned. And by the way, being new to the organization and a fresh set of eyes, here are some observations I've had that might be opportunities for continuous improvement. And we can be open to understanding why things are the way they are. But the reason why that extra extension for high performance is important is it's actually already showing an agility mindset. It's already showing a level of curiosity, and it's already showing very early on an ability to sort of want to learn and grow in a role. And that'd be the differentiation between doing what you say you're going to do and actually showing capability to do much, much more.
yeah, absolutely. It sounds like it demonstrates not only that sort of strategic mindset, but also just like passion and genuine curiosity and interest for the business and for what they're doing and all those sorts of things. So I think, when we speak to employers, even in the recruitment process, sometimes that level of kind of demonstration of just passion and interest, it's surprising how that translates not only in the recruitment process, but absolutely in the first 90 days and beyond. So really, really important.
Yeah, and you
Yeah.
can't, and you can answer that those things are important to you in a selection process, but you can't put it into practice until you've actually arrived there and you've actually
Yeah.
seen what you're dealing with, what the current landscape is.
Yeah, and it's I guess that's the good thing. It's like like you can also say it on a resume or on your LinkedIn, but do you actually demonstrate it? And I think those are things to keep for people to keep themselves, I guess, accountable for really as part of that process. So just in closing, James, so looking back across the whole transition journeys, and we've talked about a lot of different things in the last sort of four sort of times we've caught up. What do people often realize once they're settled into their next role? Like when they've gone through the process, what is it that you'd love them to kind of go, I wish I'd known this before?
Yeah. Look, I think the one thing I would really hope that people take into the next role is that all of the things they've learnt and the good habits they've formed
Yeah.
through the assessment of what they're doing and where they're going when it came to career transitions are actually taken into the next role. And I hear it often from people who've actually had a really great uh, experience from their
Mm,
own input when it came to making the most out of the opportunity that presents itself in career transition. I know that's often a term that people don't see it as an opportunity, but I maintain and truly believe it can be if
yeah.
someone does all of the right things. Just don't give up those good habits when you get into the new role. So
Yep.
go back into sort of a sense of complacency. Oh, great, I've landed my new role. I'm going to take my foot off the gas and relax. I'm not going to make the effort to continue to invest in networking. I'm going to get sucked back into having a focus that is 90% of my time is spent thinking, or sometimes 100% of my time is spent thinking just about the role I'm in and the organization I'm in, and losing
Yeah.
that curiosity around what's going on externally to the business you're in, whether that's keeping up to date with market trends, whether that's continuous learning, or whether that's continuing to evolve your network. So, should you find yourself in the same scenario again, it's not as big a mountain to climb to go, all right, now I need to actually think about how I reestablish some networks I haven't tapped into for a really long time, because you've maintained them throughout the new role. So taking the really good habits formed, if you've done career transition right, and keeping them.
Yeah, I love it. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, networking needs to be everybody's BAU. That sort of business as usual is networking. And I always just break it down very simply as it's having conversations and building relationships. That's really all it is.
Yes, and
That's
it
all.
also links perfectly back to TJ what I was just mentioning before, and the difference between sort of high performers when they're in a new role. So think about it
Yeah.
from your employer side. If you've got someone showing up and they're saying, hey, guess what insights I'm bringing to you today, because I'm one of the few people who has actually learnt the value of networking. Do you know what's going
Mm,
on in XYZ? Or I just went to this industry or association event and this is everything I
mm.
learnt. It's really impressive.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, it's the marketing plan 101 as well. It's like, let me show you the breadcrumbs that I've been picking up. Like, never stop picking up the breadcrumbs. Keep doing the breadcrumbs. Last question for you, James. So, if you could leave people with one piece of advice for this stage, for that part where people are starting their new role, which it could be it could feel like it's going to be the perfect role. It may feel like it's a role where they're going to learn things, as you say. Hopefully, there's more pros in there. What would be that one piece of advice you'd leave people with about this stage of the transition process? Because arguably, people could see it as, yep, job done, tick, never going there again. But you and I know the reality is, I mean, I've had 3 redundancies in my own personal career. It can happen again. And what have you learned? And what would you give people as a gift for that this piece of the puzzle?
Yeah, it would be to be deliberate, be structured, but don't overemphasize the importance of this like one individual decision.
Cool. Like it. Yeah. It's just part of the puzzle. It's not the whole of your life.
It's part of it. It is effectively like a lovely in conclusion for all the things we've just discussed. So all of the stuff around being deliberate, being structured about it, but at the same
Yeah.
time not overemphasizing it, and back to that thinking of, is this a step in the right direction
Mm.
versus just building it up into a decision that's bigger than it really needs to be.
Yeah. And you said something earlier which just made me think about that thing of it's a career that spans over years. Everything that you learn along the way is beneficial. And career transition is just not just about what you're moving away from and where you've come from. It's actually about what you're moving into and what you're learning. And there is so much happening in the market. It's an exciting place. It's definitely an uncertain place, but it's definitely an exciting place to be as well. So very much look forward to speaking to you next month.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm looking forward to it as well. And I think, that is it's not the answer to my final question, but it links back to exactly where I started. Yeah, there is going to be a continuous discussion in
Mm,
every organisation, and it was in ours, hence the trip to Munich, around the impacts of AI. Please, it's
mm.
not linked to today's topic, but my other takeaway is please keep educating yourself and staying on top of the latest thinking when it comes to, particularly for your role type and for your industry type. Just stay ahead of the curve. There is so much information out there. And okay, yes, a lot of that information is opinion, but remember that actually collating a lot of opinions and finding your truth and your reality and your response to that is important. So, not linked
Yeah.
to today's topic, but please keep on top of that stuff. It is really important now more than ever.
Yeah, thanks, James. I think the reality is no matter what role or industry people move into next, at some point, somewhere, they're going to touch upon it. And if you don't know about it, that's where it's going to be difficult, and it's going to get even more challenging because it's moving so quickly. So just, you'll never stay up with it. Potentially, it's one of those things where, you chase that rabbit, you're never going to catch it, but you can at least, as you say, be aware of it, and also how it's just affecting that your industry or your role type, or just in general, just keep your finger on the pulse.
And for
Yeah.
good and for good and for bad, right? So it's not I'm not talking about, stay across it as, will this come and impact my job? It's only one
Yeah.
very small part of it. It's like, what advantage can I get from staying
Yeah.
informed? How's
Yeah.
that going to help me outperform in my existing role? And then if there is any danger, how do I stay ahead of it? How do I already start in, myself, not waiting for it to happen? How do I already start getting ahead of how my role might have to adapt if new things are introduced? So it's not
Yeah.
the negative side of it. I don't want that to be like it's not a, you need to do it as a protection thing. It's actually, how do I do it to benefit myself and stay ahead of the curve? That is the reason for the call out.
Brilliant. Love it. Awesome. Thank you so much. Great to see you as always, and definitely look forward to seeing you next month.
Thanks, DJ.
Cheers.